Bevo and the boys will be taking the field in 2023 with nothing short of high expectations. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Long Snap Podcast. I am Hunter Waldrop, and today I'll be sitting down and discussing how I think the Texas Longhorns will perform in 2023. Now, before we get to Texas football and how I think they're going to do in 2023, leave a like. Hit the subscribe button right next to it. It helps the channel out, and I greatly, greatly appreciate it. Also, leave a comment. Leave your opinion on how you think Texas is going to do. Tell me how I can improve this show, and also tell me who you want to see me preview next. I'll fulfill that promise, and we will get it done. Next up, social media. Pretty simple. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. All three of them are the same username at longsnap_hunt. I'm being pretty active on Twitter as much as I can. Interact with me on there. I greatly appreciate it. Instagram and TikTok, the accounts are made. We're trying to figure out how to get them up and running daily, but it will be sooner rather than later. Thank you very much. I greatly appreciate you for giving this a listen or a watch. Also, Apple Podcast and Spotify. We are now live on both. So if you have Apple Podcasts or if you have an iPhone, great. Apple Podcasts probably already downloaded on your phone. Make sure you can just type in the Long Snap with Hunter Waldrop. It should pop up. If not, if it's not popping up, it's because it's freshly new probably. Go to one of the social medias. It's in my Twitter. It's in the Instagram, and you can find it there. Same thing with Spotify. You might not be able to find it as soon as you type it in. The links are in the Instagram and the Twitters. So please go use those resources to your disposal. I know some people don't want to watch the YouTube, or they don't have YouTube Premium where they can just listen to it driving down the road. That's why we got the Apple Podcast. That's why we got the Spotify. So those are now there at your disposal. If you do go on those two and you don't watch this on YouTube or don't listen to it on YouTube, leave a 5-star rating or leave me a comment and a review on what you think about the show. That for sure will help on the podcast platforms individually. Once again, thank you guys for being a part of this journey with me, and I'm very, very excited to see where it goes. Now let's talk about some Texas football. So everybody knows about Texas. Everybody knows about the Hook'em Horns, the big orange logo, and the prestige. They're known as a blue blood program. Very, very historic team. But I'm going to ask you guys something. What has Texas done since 2009? They haven't done anything. They haven't even won a Big 12 championship since 2009. And I don't know if I need to remind everybody, but up until 2017, there was no Big 12 championship game. All you had to do was have the conference record in the regular season to be seen as the Big 12 champion. And Texas hasn't done that since 2009. They've gone through a few head coaches, notably Tom Herman. And before, or after Mac Brown, up until Sarkisian, there's just been a dead zone where Texas has just been very, very underwhelming. Steve Sarkisian, just brought him up. This is his third season. 2021, he went 5-7, didn't make a bowl game. People are freaking out, not knowing what to do, not knowing what to think about Texas. Last year, he gets Quinn Ewers to be his starter, and they go 8-4, and then 8-5 to finish it out with a bowl game loss to Washington in the Alamo Bowl. Now, Ewers obviously injured in the Alabama game at the second quarter, into the first quarter, right down there in the red zone. And that kind of shifted the perplexion of the game. Now, I'm not going to be one to sit up here and tell you that Alabama doesn't win that game if Quinn Ewers doesn't get hurt, because I truly don't believe that. For all we know, Alabama comes out in the second half and Texas doesn't score another point. You don't never know. Teams have to deal with injuries. That's part of football. Now, a casual fan would tell you, "Oh, Alabama, they shouldn't have won that game." If Quinn Ewers was there, Alabama wouldn't have won. Well, we don't know that. We don't know that. Maybe we'll find that out this year when they come to Tuscaloosa, but we don't know about that. Now let's talk about transfer portal and recruiting. In the transfer portal, Sark has been doing good. He hasn't been going out and getting loads of talent from here and there, but what he has been doing is getting positional needs. So I know at defensive back, they brought in a few players from this past portal class. They didn't need to get players from everywhere, but they got it there. They added A.D. Mitchell at wide receiver from Georgia. Huge pickup. That guy's going to be an NFL receiver. And then you also have a really, really good past three recruiting classes. All three of them top 15. In 2021, it was 15th. In 2022, it was 5th. And then this past cycle, 2023, it was third, with notably Arch Manning being at the top of that list. And like I said, Arch Manning at the top of that list, he was probably the biggest talking point for Texas heading into this season. But guys, Arch Manning's not starting. He's going to take his time. He's going to redshirt and he's going to develop. So while we're on the topic of quarterback and offense, let's talk about how the Texas offense is going to do for this 2023 season. So 85% of Texas production returns on the offensive side of the ball. And Texas is losing Bijan Robinson. So that's something to say that you're losing the best player on your team to the NFL, and you still have 85% of talent. Excuse me. You still have 85% of talent staying and playing for you next season. That includes all 5 offensive linemen. I remember last year that was a talking point, I should say rather, that people had about Texas. It was a big concern. A few freshmen, and then I know they had a few injuries, and people were unsure on how that offensive line was going to do. They ended up not doing too bad, and I have an early prediction. I think they're going to be a top 5 offensive line in the country this year. Like notably, I said they lost Bijan Robinson. That's okay because they have a pretty solid running back room that we'll hop into here in just a second. So let's talk about quarterback. Let's talk about the man of the hour, Quinn Ewers. Quinn Ewers is heading into the 2023 season with the 3rd best Heisman odds, tied with Jalen Daniels from Jaden Daniels, I should say, rather, from LSU, not Jalen Daniels from Kansas. But Jaden Daniels from LSU and Quinn Ewers are tied for 3rd best odds behind Drake May, Caleb Williams, and Jordan Travis. Those 3 guys all have better odds than those 2. What I'd like to see out of Quinn Ewers heading into the 2023 season is just to be much more consistent. I already talked about the Alabama game. I already said that he was looking really, really good. He was looking like he was making the throws, stepping up in the pocket, not scared of the pressure that Alabama was bringing. And then he obviously goes down and gets hurt. But the Oklahoma State game is one I do want to point out. And also the TCU game. Both of those games, that wasn't the same Quinn Ewers. I know he had an injury, but he had already been back for a few weeks up to that point because his first game back was against Oklahoma in the Red River Shootout. Obviously, Texas beat the brakes off Oklahoma in that game last year, but the consistency just never stayed the same. So I think if Texas does want to make that next step, they're going to have more consistent play out of quarterback Quinn Ewers. Now, Ewers does have plenty of options to throw to. This is a top 3 wide receiver room in the country. A.D. Mitchell, transfer from Georgia. Now, I know A.D. Mitchell had problems with staying on the field because of injuries, but anybody that watched Georgia football for the past 2 years, they know that A.D. Mitchell is a superstar whenever he is on the field. So if he can stay healthy for all 12 games this year, the Big 12 better watch out because that guy is a superstar. Then you have Xavier Worthy and Whittington. Both of those guys are returning for Texas this year. Everybody knows the name Xavier Worthy. Lightning speed. He's fast, can run the jet sweep, can take the top off the defense. He is a stud. So it's unfair for some of these opponents. Texas wide receiver room is right up there with Ohio State for as far as best in the nation. And then here's a name I want people to remember. Isaiah Nair. Isaiah Nair was the talked about wide receiver transfer from last season. Well, before the 2022 season could start, he tore his ACL. He transferred in from Wyoming, and he hasn't had the opportunity to play in Texas yet, but he's healthy. And guys, that kid is going to be good. Another notable Wyoming transfer. That kid is going to be a stud for the Burnt Orange this year. Remember the name, Isaiah Nair. Now, running backs, we're going to have to get a little tricky. It's never easy losing a guy like Bijan Robinson, the best running back in college football last year, arguably. He was a top 10 pick in the NFL draft, went to the Atlanta Falcons. Just not an easy guy to replace. He could do it all, both between the tackles and in the receiving game. He's a stud. You have Jonathan Brooks, Keelan Robinson, and C.J. Baxter. Jonathan Brooks and Keelan Robinson have not had a lot of playing time. I think combined they have just a little over 900 yards total in their career, and Jonathan Brooks is a senior. So it's gonna be interesting to see how Texas attacks it. Now, like I said, they've recruited. These guys have got to be good, especially C.J. Baxter. I think he's actually going to be the one that leaps out above and beyond all of them. C.J. Baxter was a top running back in the class of 2023. He's going to be a true freshman. And I think he's going to be a very, very helpful true freshman. And I think running back position is going to be in a better place because of him. But I think this is going to be a running back by committee type of thing. You're seeing a lot of teams get into it. There's not necessarily a premier back anymore. You have 2, 3 running backs coming in every so often, every few plays to get, keep having fresh legs on the field. Offensive line, I already touched up on it. I said they're going to be a top 5 offensive line in the country. They return all 5 starters. The chemistry is there. You have All-American left tackle. Texas has got the protection up front and the run blocking up front for the offense to be successful. Let's hop into the defensive side of the ball. And this is where it gets a little questionable. And this is kind of like a Big 12 stereotype, but Big 12 defenses are not notably known to be the best. Now, Texas, they were okay last year, but however, they did lose 6 or 7 starters. And you can look at that at a glass half full or a glass half empty. Well, if the Big 12 defenses aren't that very good, well, what are you really losing? Or it's, dang, these guys were pretty good leaders and we need them on our team, whichever way you want to look at it. Last season, they did lead the nation in quarterback pressures, which is very impressive. That's a good stat to have, but you got to get them on the ground. Just ask Bryce Young at the end of that game last year. But they do have lots of returning production on the defensive line itself. Both Sweat and Murphy are coming back. Those will be 2 very good leadership type pieces to have and to get after that quarterback. Defensive back, I think this is going to be Texas' strong suit this year. I think they're going to be very, very good. They have a veteran type group, lots of upperclassmen. But they also brought in some transfers from Arkansas and from Wake Forest to help round out that defensive back group. If they can play at a very consistent level, it's going to be hard to take the top off the Texas defense. Now, if there is one guy I do want to talk about on the defensive side of the ball before we get into the schedule, it's middle linebacker Jalen Ford. I'm going to read off his stats just to make sure I don't mess these up. This is what Jalen Ford did last year and who is returning for Texas at middle linebacker. 119 tackles, 10 tackle for losses, which is very good for a middle linebacker, 4 interceptions, 3 forced fumbles, and 2 fumble recoveries. That kid's a beast. And that kid is going to be the guy that you need to look out for on Texas defense. He's a stud. Obviously, he creates turnovers, I should say, rather. And when he's not creating turnovers, he's tackling the guy with the ball. That is probably the most notable name that you didn't already know coming into this video that you need to know now. Middle linebacker for Texas, Jalen Ford. Before we get into the schedule, there are 2 more things I do want to say. There are things to improve on here. I know I just kind of hyped up Texas to be this almighty squad, but there are things to improve from last year. The passing game has got to get more consistent. I know I talked about it when I was talking about Quinn Ewers, but I think Quinn Ewers is going to make that jump. He's had 1 year to start. I mean, the kid was like 19, 18 years old last year. So he's still very young. He's going to be very good, I believe, and he's going to be with Sark. And we all know Sark's a offensive mastermind. Just go watch the Alabama 2020 football season. My goodness, if you're an offensive guru, go watch that. And then consistent defensive production. There'd be some games, Alabama got held to, what was it, 19 points last year or whatever it was, something like that against Texas. But also giving up, 30, 40 points, that's not very good either. So you got to have consistent passing game and consistent defensive production, and specifically just getting the quarterback on the ground, making those sacks, turning those QB pressures into sacks. I think those are the two areas that Texas most certainly needs to improve on if they want to make that big jump that everybody's buying them into for 2023. So let's talk about the schedule and a few things to note before we get into game one. Texas over-under win total is 9.5 heading into 2023, meaning that if you think Texas is going to win more than 9 games, you take the over. And if you think they're going to win 9 or less games, you take the under. And I think that's a pretty, reasonable line to have Texas at. They are by far the Big 12 favorites to win the championship this year. They're about minus 125, minus 150 odds, meaning you have to bet $125 or $150 in order to make $100 in profit. Next behind them is Oklahoma at around plus 300, depending on where you look, and plus 300, meaning you have to bet $100 to win 300 in profit. There are going to be a few bumps in the road. I think the Big 12 is getting overlooked a little bit this year. Especially with the addition of 4 new teams in Houston, BYU, Cincinnati, and UCF. But I think Texas gets an easier draw as far as playing the new additional teams that they've added this year. So that plays out in their favor. But I do think the Big 12 is getting overlooked. Everybody's already, buying out or selling their stock in TCU, thinking, well, if they were a one and done, they were a fluke. And then there's Oklahoma. People are, Brent Venables not a very good head coach, selling their stock on him, and a few others. I mean, Dave Aranda 2 years ago at Baylor, made the Big 12 championship, was playing really good football, 9-10 win season over there. Then you can't forget about Kansas State. They feel like, not a lot of people think about them, but they're always there. They actually won the Big 12 championship last year, despite TCU being the one in the playoff and the national championship game. So I think, they're getting overlooked, but I think Texas is the most talented team in the Big 12 heading into 2023. So, producer Preston, pull up that Texas schedule, and I'll give a game-by-game prediction on how I think they're going to do. So, first up, you have Rice at home. There's one rule on this show, and I got this from Late Kicker Josh Pate. You don't lose the food. There's no excuse Texas should be losing to a team called Rice. But shout out JT Daniels, former Georgia quarterback, going to be the starter for Rice this year. And then here's the game everybody's talking about. Week 2, college game day is going to be there. Was a really, really good game last year. Came down to the wire. Bryce Young and Will Reichert saving the day for Alabama. And this year, Texas has to go to T-Town, a.k.a. Tuscaloosa, Alabama. And, man, I'm picking Texas to win. Yeah, I just said that. I am on record. I just picked Texas to go into Tuscaloosa and beat Nick Saban, a team that hasn't lost at home since 2019 to Joe Burrow's LSU team. Yeah, I just did that. And I really hope by week 2 I'm not regretting that, because I'm going to feel like a complete idiot, because I'm one up here to say you never pick against Nick Saban. You just don't do it. That's like rule of thumb. I don't care if they're 0-11. You pick Nick Saban to win. But if picking Nick Saban to win is the only reasoning I have to pick Alabama, I just don't think that's right. I don't think it's right. Because besides just saying Nick Saban, he doesn't lose. Now, I do think Nick Saban's going to make a point of emphasis on this game before the season starts. But I think Texas does get it done on the road. I think this is going to be a statement game for Sark and for Quinn Ewers. I think it's going to be a barn burner, nail biting type of game. It's going to probably come down to a field goal type situation again. But I do think Texas gets on the right side of Alabama this time, despite me being very high on Alabama compared to a few others. I think Alabama's defense is going to be the best, if not one of the best in the nation. But right now, July 16th, 2023, I don't see it happening. I see Texas going in there and getting a win. And thank goodness you're playing Wyoming the week after, because the following Wyoming, you got to go to Baylor. And I'll tell you right now, if you had to play at Baylor right after playing at Alabama, I'd give you a loss to Baylor. I would. But you're playing Wyoming at home. You're going to get the win, so you don't have the opportunity for a letdown spot. You're going to get your feet back underneath you, get back down to planet Earth. You go on the road to Baylor, and then you come back home against Kansas. I think you win both of those games as well. I think Baylor's going to be a solid team, just like last year. I know they took a step backwards. I could see them doing somewhere in the middle of that 9 to 10 win season and that 6 win season they had last year, going 7, 8 wins. I would never count out Dave Aranda. I think he's a very, very good coach, and I think Baylor's always going to be a physical team. But I got Texas winning on the road at Waco, and then funny enough, the thorn in the side of you, the Kansas Jayhawks. Yeah, no, not this year. Give me Texas to beat Kansas at home. And then you go to the Cotton Bowl for the Red River Shootout against Oklahoma. Neutral site game, obviously. You beat the ever-living snot out of Oklahoma just last season, 49-0, and it could have been a lot worse. I don't think Oklahoma's going to put on a performance that bad. If there's any game that Oklahoma has scheduled or circled on their schedule, I should say rather, it is this one. I think it's going to be close, but give me Texas to beat the Sooners in 2023 to get back-to-back wins. So that takes you into your bye week, and I got you going 6-0 in your first 6 games. Your last 6 games, and your first 2 out of the last 6, I should say rather, should be easy wins. At Houston, BYU, both of those should be wins. I know BYU's played, Power 5 competition for the better half of them being in the independent conference. I don't think it should be an issue that you should beat them at home, and I don't see Houston improving to acclimating to the Big 12 very well, I should say, rather. So at Houston and at home against BYU, I think both of those should be easy wins. Your last 4 games is a terrible stretch. It's terrible. And I could see you losing any of these 4 games. So after you get a very, very close win against Kansas State at home, you have to go on the road to TCU and then on the road the following week after that to Iowa State. Now, this is a 2-week road stretch that's going to get overlooked. To the casual eye, like I already said in the beginning of this video, people have already written off TCU. Not saying that last year was a fluke. And then Iowa State, they only won 3 or 4 ball games last year, but people forget that's a very physical team. They actually gave Texas a pretty close run for their money last year in Austin. I don't think they're a team to sleep on. I think they could be a bowl team this year. They're always going to be a physical team, and that's Matt Campbell's team, man. They're always going to be, they're always going to be right there at the end of most games. With all that being said, I do have you dropping one of the 2. I have you dropping a game on the road at TCU, and then I do have you picking up a win at home or on the road at Iowa State. Why did I choose TCU over Iowa State? I think TCU is better. I don't think TCU is just going to go away. I think they're going to be 9-3 type of caliber. They're still going to be a solid team. I know they lost a lot of pieces, but I don't think it was necessarily a full-on fluke where they're going to fall off the face of the earth. And it's impossible. It's not, sorry, wrong term. Not impossible to go 12-0. It's just very, very difficult to do. It's not like there's 4 or 5 teams every single year going 12-0. Usually just one, sometimes two. It's not easy to do. And when you have to go on a 2-week road stretch like that, it's not easy to do. If they prove me wrong, then people just better watch out because Texas might run the entire table this year. But I do have you dropping it to TCU, and now I have you at 9-1. I have you at 10-1, beating Iowa State, and then you finish the season off with a win at home against Texas Tech, which gets you to 11-1 and a Big 12 title game appearance in my book. Now, one thing I will say is just because you make it to the Big 12 title, you got to win it. You got to win it. You wouldn't have to win it if you were 12-0, but now that you're 11-1, you got to win it in order to make that playoff. And we'll get into those here in the next few weeks or so. Watch out for Texas Tech because you might be playing them twice in back-to-back weeks. A little sneak peek for you. So, a little quick review. I think Texas is going to be a phenomenal team. They added the right pieces. They got great recruiting classes. They obviously got the guy in Sark to run the offense for them. Quinn Ewers is going to be a stud this year. I predict that he's going to make a massive, massive leap forward and start playing a lot more consistent rather than he did in 2022. I think Texas' offensive line is going to be top 5 in the nation. I think their wide receiver room is top 3 in the nation. And I think their defensive backs are going to be their best part of the defense. And if there's one guy that you didn't know his name before this video started, you need to know it now. It's Jalen Ford, middle linebacker at Texas. 11-1, Big 12 title game appearance. And that's how I have the Longhorns doing in 2023. Guys, don't forget, hit the like button, subscribe, leave a comment. Tell me your opinions on Texas and how you think they're going to do in 2023. Go follow the social medias at longsnap_hunt, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. Thank you guys for everything you do. God first, God bless.